It's that time of year again. Despite being a terrible skeptic who believes in literally nothing, least of all ghosts and ghouls, I love Halloween. And I think in part it's the time of year that gives it such romance. The evenings are drawing in dark and crisp, windows glow warmly in the cold night air, and even the daylight takes on a different quality, sullen, low and thin. And Dartmoor, of course, beautiful in all seasons, takes on a melancholy spookiness that it wears so well. No wonder it's crowded with tales of ghosts and devils and pixies and witches. But today I'm not going looking for any of these supernatural beings. No, I'm going in search of fear itself. Prepare for creepy settings, spooky tales, and more Dutch angles than you can shake a stick at. Welcome back to the Dartmoor podcast. I like spooky stuff. I like that little thrill you feel when reading a ghost story or watching a scary film. But I can't remember the last time I was properly scared. Admittedly, this is probably because I'm so brave and macho and tough. Last year, for Halloween, I camped out alone near the haunted Wistman's Wood in the heart of Dartmoor and spent the night tempting fate looking for some of the spirits that lurked there. And despite a strange audio encounter with the wandering spirit of Jumbo the Terrier, or maybe just a fox or something, I still didn't get frightened. So this year, for your entertainment and my curiosity, I've resolved to try and scare myself stiff. Really freak myself out. Shit myself up. And how am I going to do it? Well, one thing's for sure. Just going wild camping again, no matter how creepy the environment, wasn't going to do the job. I'm just too used to it. And perhaps counterintuitively, I find sleeping out in a bivvy in the dark in the woods one of the least frightening experiences. The openness actually means you can sense what's around you, and once you're tuned into the sounds of your surroundings, you know nothing dangerous can realistically sneak up on you. But how about a spooky abandoned house? Now we're talking. Nuns Farm was built in the 1800s, right out in the middle of nowhere. It was never going to be a successful venture, was it? After a short and dull history as a late Victorian farmhouse, it was abandoned. But not before a spooky story was attached to it. The tale goes that one misty night the farmer's wife went out to check on the lowing cattle and just never returned. And you'd think this would be the bit where I pull my scarf over my head like an old lady and reenact the event, but I haven't. Because if it's true, it seems a bit disrespectful, and it probably isn't true anyway. In my research, I couldn't find any names or dates or sources attributed to this story at all, so even though it's pretty plausible as far as spooky tales go, I don't think it actually happened. At least not here. So, there's no specific ghost or haunting attributed to this place, but it does seem rather desolate and creepy, and maybe that's all I'll need to get my heart racing. And I'll be keeping an open mind and trying to be serious about the possibility of encountering anything supernatural. Creepier than I thought. By the time I arrived at the house, the light was already beginning to fade. I probably had about 2 hours before it was properly dark, and there is no electricity at all at Nuns Farm, so I'd be relying on my rather feeble head torch and the light from my phone. After a quick look around and undoing a bewildering number of padlocks and shutters, I worked out how to get some water out of the rain butt and fire up the old gas burners for a cup of tea. For my night at Nuns Cross Farm, I promised not to employ any camera trickery or frighten you with jump scares. Except that one. Oh, okay, and probably some other ones too. I won't be able to resist. A good way to prepare yourself if that does bother you is to brace yourself whenever you see me sitting conspicuously to one side of the screen. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that there's going to be nothing here to deliberately deceive you. If something supernatural happens, it really happens. Unshuttered, the downstairs consisted of a very large and dingy kitchen, a small room with a wood burner and a couple of long tables, and a third room with some eerie bunk bed frames in. Oh, and some animal bones, as there often are lying around in creepy old houses. After finding the compostable toilet, I made a brief explore of the outsides of the house, saying hello to the cattle and sheep that would be my only neighbours for the night. There's an upstairs too, but I decided to wait until after dark to go and have a look. Because, with the light fading, there was something I needed to take care of. Taking advantage of the excellent, if a little grubby-looking gas hobs, I began work on a nourishing yet devastatingly spicy pumpkin Thai green curry. And maybe it was because I was busy cooking, or maybe because I drank a few beers, I hardly noticed the last of the light slip away. As my curry simmered, the night fell, leaving only a bleary red smear where the sun had been. I demolished my dinner on the front step with another beer and my pumpkin friend for company. Finally, in the dark, with a fine drizzle beginning to fall and that empty old house at my back, I felt a little shiver of vulnerability out in that isolated location. So, to my main mission, to try and scare myself. But trying to scare yourself is a bit like trying to tickle yourself, I suppose, or make yourself laugh. It's impossible to catch yourself off guard. It seems that the owners had made an effort to help me out here with a number of scary stories pinned to the walls of the front room, but they weren't doing the trick. I set up my bed on the floor by the wood burner and started up the fire. I thought back to the scary story I'd been reading earlier that day, about a werewolf loose on the moor, and remembered I'd seen a rotting deer's head by the side of the path back towards Burrator. But werewolves are a bit Scooby-Doo for me, if you know what I mean. I'd need to think of something scarier. I know something that always gives me goosebumps, the scariest dream I ever had. I must have been about 12 or 13 years old. In the dream I was staying at my nan's house when the phone rang. It wasn't a mobile phone, of course, it was an old rotary phone. No, I'm afraid they're out at the moment. Do you want me to tell them to? I took some sort of message and then sat down on the sofa to read my book.
Bye-bye.
Then the phone rang again, And before I could react, I came in and answered it just as before. Identical to before, in fact.
Hello?
And with a chill, it dawned on me that when it finished that phone call, it would walk over and sit on me. I don't know what logic exists within the dream world, but in that place I knew with every fibre of my being that that thing must not touch me. The thought of it made me cold. What is it about a doppelganger that's so terrifying? The double, the devil. Maybe I was beginning to spook myself out a bit. I could feel my body reacting. The biology of fear is pretty interesting when you think about it. A purely evolutionary reflex designed to put you in the best possible state to deal with the threat and live to pass on your genes another day. It starts in your amygdala, some deep and ancient core in the brain that knows when the shit's about to hit the fan. The amygdala sits in the centre of your skull like a weird threat-detecting testicle and triggers a release of adrenaline to the body when detecting danger. And all the weird sensations we encounter that we interpret as fear are easily explained by this adrenaline rush. You breathe heavily, getting oxygen to the muscles ready to run or fight, and your heart rate and blood pressure increase too for the same reason. Your pupils dilate, increasing your peripheral vision. You're more numb to pain. Even goosebumps can be explained this way. It's your body remembering a much more hirsute ancestor whose hairs standing on end would have made them look larger and more threatening. And the feeling of a sudden chill people report when in the presence of a ghost? Well, your body is prioritising getting blood to the core running and fighting muscles, leaving your extremities feeling cold. Then, what normally happens is that the hippocampus, a more sort of boring grown-up part of the brain, evaluates what's going on and gives the order to stand down. We just jumped at a shadow, or the sound of a sheep. It was just a glance of myself in the mirror. Normally. I can understand why people are scared of things like spiders, snakes, heights, etc. They serve an evolutionary purpose. But why are people scared of ghosts? Sorry, it says here, why are Popel scared of gods? Great spelling. Anyway, this is my point. I wasn't fully engaging with my situation. I'm sure all the silly reenactments and pumpkin curries and eerie time lapses are good content. Actually, I'm not even sure of that. But they weren't conducive to truly experiencing the feeling of being alone in that strange, stark old building without a living soul for miles around.
Oh, let's go and look upstairs then.
Maybe it was time to look upstairs.
Doesn't really matter if it's loud, does it? There's no one around. There's a bit of a manoeuvre here. Open. It's a weird little room.
Looking back on this, maybe I was a bit scared. I certainly seemed to be talking to myself, to you, to us, more than normal. Could be the beers, though. And I get a more than necessary amount of giggles from the idea of having a party in the house. Although that would actually be pretty cool.
Imagine if you had everyone in these beds. How many people could you get in here? A crazy party.
It was time to blow out the pumpkin, turn off the light, and see if anything would creak or bump in the night. So, nothing scary happened to me at all at Nuns Cross. It was a really cool place to stay. But maybe I'm looking at this all wrong by trying to find ghosts or work out what scares me. Maybe the lesson I'm meant to learn from this Halloween's adventure is that there's something wrong with me. Perhaps I've got weird shrivelled little amygdala like a couple of peppercorns. Maybe that's what these Halloween specials should really be about, seeing if George has got a screw loose. That's the challenge then for next year. Who can scare me? Suggestions below, please. Eerie locations that'll give me the willies. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy Halloween. See you next time.